Hello universe, this is how to migrate the Blazing Race template to your own project. And to use an example, I'm going to make a blank project, or maybe a project that uses one of these game templates. But I guess realistically, I should use the vehicle. But just to showcase that my template is supposed to work with anything, any actor, I'm just going to create a third person project. All right. Now that I'm done creating the project, before I move the Blazing Race template here, I have to enable 3 plugins in particular. Well, 4 if you're using an older project. So first one is the Chaos Vehicle plugin. That one was turned off, so we turn it on because the cars need it. The next one is Common UI. Enable that. The next one is 3D Text. Enable that. Then Enhanced Input. That's already enabled. Hooray. Now we restart and wait for it to come back. All right, now that it's back, I'm ready to migrate the Blazing Race template over here. And migration, it's easy. You just right click on the folder, migrate, it selects everything, click OK, and go to the new projects. So now that we're done migrating, and we can go back to our third person projects, and here it is, the Blazing Race template. And there should be no errors, hopefully, because we've already enabled all the necessary plugins. Now, to start a race is pretty simple. The 3 things you need are a race manager, which you can find in the blueprints folder of the Blazing Race templates. You should see BP Race Manager. There it is. Now, to talk about the manager in more detail, there are a lot of things it can do as soon as we add the second and third things. The second thing you need is actually something that's optional, which is the road spline. The road spline is used for the generation of checkpoints as well as for the AI cars that I've included. It's used as navigation for the AI cars. So if you don't want to use the AI cars are provided, or you don't want to use procedural checkpoint generation, then you technically don't need the road. But I'm going to assume, for the sake of this tutorial, that you do want the road spline. I'm also going to just, didn't mean to do that. I'm also going to just make a bigger map than way bigger. All right, just so we have more space to play with. So I can move this along, I can make a bend, and you can also change what this arrow mesh is on the properties of the, there it is, that's the placed mesh. You can also toggle so that it doesn't show up and it remains hidden. The road spline can also generate a road mesh, although it's it doesn't seem to handle intense curves very well. So you get things like that. It is a pretty big mesh though, that's why. The next thing you need, which is the checkpoints I've already mentioned. These can be placed in one of 2 ways. You can either place them manually by hand, like I'm doing now, which is like we have 3 checkpoints, and I can specify all three of them and add them to the race manager's checkpoint pool, which is here. So I can say 1, 2, 3, pick this as my first one, and this as my second, and this as my third. Then I'll say refresh checkpoints, and you can see the debug number changes. The number is just for debugging. It doesn't, it does tell you how the checkpoints are going to activate. They activate in this sequential order as the 0 activates first, 1, 2, and so on, until it gets to the last number, and then it goes back to 0. So, but it doesn't have to start from 0. It can start from 1, and it can also start from 2, because the way the checkpoints work is a starting point is set in the race manager, and that starting point is where the race actually starts counting its first lap. Let me give you a better explanation. If I go on the race manager on the details panel, scroll down to start point, pick any checkpoint, and if I pick this one, this checkpoint that's number 1, and say set start point, what this means is that when the race begins, this will be the first to activate. And once this activates, the second one does, and since that's the last one, it will then activate 0 again, and that comes back to 1, and you've completed a lap. Speaking of laps, the race manager also has more options for the race settings. If we scroll down to race settings here, you see that we have 3 types of race: total laps, players, win minutes, win position. And these winning conditions don't really change anything for now. What does change is, for example, the laps. If you set this to 0, it means that as soon as you touch the starting point, the game ends, the race ends. So by default, we have it at 1, which means we complete a lap round, and as soon as we touch the start point again, it increases your current lap value, and once you go over 1, it means that you've won. You've completed the race ends. The next thing is player 0. We have total player 0. I should have increased this to 1 internally, but how this works right now is if you say there are 0 players, it means there's only 1 arrow here to represent player 0, which is your first player. Then if you say 1, it means that there's another arrow for your second player, and then third, and your fourth player. So you have 2, 3, 1, 0. And you can use this for your online multiplayer if your game supports multiplayer split screen. This project does support split screen multiplayer as well as online multiplayer. That's why I have up to 4 arrows here. If you want more, all you'd have to do is just increase the number of arrows in the race manager. As soon as we're done with that, setting the amount of players, the next thing we want to take a look at is let's click back on the race manager. I'm going to reset this to 0. Winning time and winning position. These two don't change anything. I mean, because of these particular enums, you could write a code that says if the player failed the race, because right now there is a certain enumerator called enum race completion, which states if the player completed the race, failed the race, or the race is in progress. And you can write code off of these saying that if they failed, mark the race as failed or something like that. But right now, it doesn't do anything besides just changing the enum. in the race manager. The next thing you see is play start cutscene. You can turn that off if you don't want to. And the race card image, which, you know, is the image that displays when we walk up to the race trigger. So if we walk up here, you see that right now it's just a plain picture, and I can change it to this. And if I go back here, the image has changed. Just gonna revert that back to default. Now, when we go to the race trigger, you'll notice that we can't start the race. The reason why is because the race trigger will only activate if you call the event interact interface. And I just opened up the race manager, so you find it down here. This is the actual function for starting a race, but if you want to, you can tie this to something else if you like. But right now, I want to use the interface. So I can go into my character, the third person character, which is very plain, beginner, so it doesn't have much of anything. I can right click on it and say, if I press the E key, did I go past it? There we go, E. When I press E, I want it to call interact. And you see the message is there and the target is BPI race events. That's the one you want. As soon as we get that, our target will be get overlap actors. And then what this means is that when you press E, it will call interact on any actors it's overlapping, the character is overlapping with. So we'll save and we'll minimize this and we'll play. And if I press E, the race begins and it's playing the starting cutscene. And you can see that we got teleported to the arrow for player 0 and the first checkpoint is activated. The next checkpoint activates and the next, and as soon as I cross it this time, because this will be my completion of the first lap, the race ends and all the checkpoints are gone. You'll notice that there are no timers or anything or minimaps or anything needed for the race. Those widgets are created in the race player controller, and it's created on begin play. You see Racer HUD widget is created, and the Racer HUD widget houses the timers, the minimap, and speedometers if you're using a car. And well, you can create this on your own. However, I do highly recommend that if you're using your own custom controller, you just copy everything that's here, as well as make sure your controller has these two interfaces, BPI race events and BPI UI events. So for the simplicity of this tutorial, I'm just going to change my game mode from the third person game, I'm going to change the controller, just the controller for now, and say race player controller. And if I hit play, you see that there's a little arrow on the bottom left. That's the minimap, but it doesn't have anything to draw. I'll tell you about that in a second. Let's just start a race. And now you can see our timers and our position are here. And as soon as the race ends, we'll see a results screen. There we go. The results screen uses data from the racer component, and the racer component is added to any character. You can see I didn't even add it to the third person character, but You can still add it manually if you like, and so you can bind events off of it. So the not found for vehicle, well, that should be character, not vehicle. It's saying not found because this third person character doesn't exist in the data table that contains all the playable characters for the game. So here I have a bunch of characters like my car, my plane, my my own third person character, as well as a police car, and all the data relating to them are here, including the name. So this name is usually what would show up here in the vehicle portion. So you can add your character to this character list, and so that it will find its name here. And that's it. We have two buttons here also. We can either restart the race or continue. And if I hit restart, it will take a second. And 3, 2, 1, a new race begins. I could also hit P now because this is being controlled by the race player controller. So the pause menu is there, and I can say exit to free roam. It will finish the race, and if because you didn't finish the race, it will say DNF, which means did not finish. Okay, hit continue, and we're free. The race ends, and that's that. Now let's settle the minimap. The minimap is set up very easily. What we need to do is go to the blueprints folder of the race templates, hit this BP capture 2D, and you'll see that it has a camera. Snap that camera to your origin location and make sure it goes a bit high. It doesn't have to be too high. Your X and Y must be 0. Don't ever change X and Y, but your Z axis, you can change that. The next thing you want to do is rotate it on the Y axis by 90 degrees. Remember, your X and Z should be 0. So I'm going to do 0, 0. Yeah. Only Y can change to 90, and for your Z, only Z can change for location. Now we're done placing the camera. We can click on this texture target to see what the camera sees, and it's blank. The reason why it's blank is because we haven't specified what the camera should look for. So if you scroll down on the details panel, you'll see a show only actors list. We click add element, and we specify we want the camera to see this road. And you can see here, if I zoom out a bit, the road is showing up, although it's in the far corner. How do we fix this? Well, to fix this, we scroll down to the ortho width, which is the projection category. If we increase this, you see that the camera zooms in and out depending on what you want. So I think this is a good size. And once I hit play, you'll see the minimap has a road. That's wonderful. You can see the road exists on the minimap. What this also means is that we can hit play, 2, 1, go. And once we start, you see that the checkpoints show up correctly on the minimap. Yeah, the checkpoints are represented by a small rectangle. You can change that if you like. But yeah, as soon as the next checkpoint activates, the older one disappears and the next one activates, appears on the map. Very easy and simple to set up minimap. Yeah, this also means that it probably won't work with maps that use world partition. I don't know. I haven't tried it. This map uses world partition, but the camera only exists for 5 seconds as soon as the game begins. So you don't have to worry about the frame performance issues that come with using a 2D capture camera, because as soon as it's done capturing the map, it will destroy itself and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's it for the the minimap. Now we've successfully made a race. However, we haven't talked about AI racers. And for that, we're going to make a much bigger map. On the race spline, say road spline, close spline loop. Need to close the loop. And there's a lot of jittery next. Yeah, we fix that. And we go back to our race manager and say refresh checkpoints. Place checkpoints. There's all. You can see that because of the gap thing, there's a lot more checkpoints. I'm not sure if I specified this before, but the checkpoints can be placed procedurally rather than manually. And the first time I placed the checkpoints was manually. This was the procedural example. And to place the checkpoints procedurally, you just have to pick the road and say place checkpoints. The next thing you want to modify is the checkpoint gap, because this controls the distance between checkpoints. So if I make this to the default value, which is 20,000, and say place checkpoints, there's only 0 and 1, because for every 20,000 units, there's only space for another 1 checkpoint. So you do want to control this a little bit and say place. I think that's a reasonable amount of checkpoints. Even though it's procedurally placed, it doesn't mean you can't still move it around as you like. You can still do that. And yeah, that's all good. Next thing is to pick our starting point, which is going to be 1. It has a lot of space. We'll go back to our race manager and tell it to pick this one as the start point and bring our player 0 location to our start points here. Now here comes the part for the AI, the NPCs, your NPCs or mine. To add additional racers, we need to go to the racers management section of the details panel. And let me just bring this up so we can see more. Here you see 3 buttons and 2 arrays. These 2 arrays must be identical for it to work properly. So what do I mean? I mean, you can say pawn to spawn, and then here is where the race manager will spawn the actors from, which is, for example, the police sedan, and another actor would be the base car child. And so I have 2 actors that I want to act as NPCs. Next step is to preview racer placement, and you see they spawn right next to player 0 arrow. And I can just specify how I want them to look when the race begins. I can put one here, and I can put another one here. Doing it like this means that the race manager will save its location. When the race starts, these 2 cars will be placed in this way. And as far as the AI is concerned, if you do have a chaos vehicle car, you can specify for your car to use the Racce AI controller that I use, and it may not work perfectly because your car may not have these collision boxes I use for detecting collision in mine, but it should just follow the spline. That's all the AI does. It's not smart enough to navigate around obstacles, so do give the cars a clear path to use. If we go back to the race manager, you'll see that the pawn to spawn and the racer pool are identical. If these are not identical, and let's say I remove the police sedan from pawn to spawn, what happens is the police sedan won't spawn at all. It will not spawn when the race begins. 2, 1, go. See? No police. So you need to go back and specify you want the police car back. And if we start the race this time, you'll see the police car is spawned. Although it and the other racer have switched places because of how they were placed in the past. And there's a bunch of errors just because one car got knocked out and fell into the abyss where it promptly got destroyed. So let's make this map a lot bigger and give the cars the opportunity to make mistakes, the freedom to make mistakes. That's it. Now, that's a good reason for making them identical. Another thing that may happen is that if you do delete, let's say we delete the police car from the racer pool here and hit play, something strange will happen where the police car will spawn, but it won't move because the race manager hasn't given it all the variables it needs to move. It doesn't even have a racer component. If this car does have a racer component simply because it's a child of a class that automatically has one. But if that was a custom character, your custom character, it won't have a racer component either. And you get a bunch of errors like this. Let's close that. So make sure to prevent any of this madness, make sure that your racer pool and your racer and your pawn to spawn are identical. And I can pick this. You can shuffle them around. All it will do is change their positions in terms of placement. But now we can play with no trouble whatsoever. There we go. You can see the two AIs are currently driving. They're much faster than me, so there's no possible way I can win. And that's it. Yeah, for making your own racing game, this is the best thing. You might have noticed that the cars have stopped. I've programmed the controller to stop the cars as soon as they are finished racing. So if I do finish my race and go up to there, you'll see their best time and their results. And I'm going to speed up this part just so I spare you the pain. All right, final stretch. I win. You can see the police car and the Jaeger have names because they exist in my character list, and I got bronze. That's terrible. It took me 7 minutes to finish the race. That is terrible. That's actually a bug. It's not really a bug. It only happens when you click outside the editor. The timer acts weird, but during normal gameplay, of course, this wouldn't happen. So don't worry about it too much. And yeah, hit continue. The cars will disappear in a second. Everything's gone. Sorry, I meant place checkpoints. So now we've placed the checkpoints. They've removed the extra one, and I'm going to use this pick 0 as pick 1 as my set start point. Remember, it can be any number. I'm just choosing 1 because I've already placed all the cars there. Then I'm going to put number 5, click on number 5, and I'm going to tell it that it is a start point. What this means is that this checkpoint can end the race because it will increase our lap value. So if I hit play and start a race, you'll see the cars drive up to that checkpoint and the race will end. Pretty short race. And the race is completed. That's how you make a sprint race. If you want to make a time trial, it's the same thing, except on the race manager, you just specify that it's a time trial. So you can specify in the race settings that it's a time trial. And what this does is that the timers will only show the time needed to win. You can see it's now, it says time to beat. There's no lap time or best time, just the time to beat. And you can specify the win time here from 1 minute to 2 minutes or whatsoever. Sorry folks, I didn't notice this earlier, but you've noticed that we've increased the size of our map, and so the minimap wasn't displaying correctly during the race. The reason for this particular issue is because we haven't increased the size of the minimap camera. You can see the widgets are floating in empty space on the minimap. We can fix that. All we need to do is to go back to that camera, the BP Capture 2D, and tell it, we'll check the texture, and you can see the texture is only showing a little bit, and that's bad. So let's fix that by increasing the ortho width again, and now we can see the whole track. So if I press play, you can see the checkpoints now scale correctly to the map. And yeah, in case you noticed that bug, this is the fix. Another thing you may have noticed is that when we do go over to the race trigger, there's no input action button. In the demo, you may have seen press F to start or something similar. But here we don't see any icons like that. And that's because of the way Common UI needs to be set up. If you do care about the button icons, this is the way to set it up. Go over to your project settings and head over to Common Input Settings. Over there, set it to BRT Input Data. BRT Input Data. Next thing is your general settings. Change your Game Viewport Client class to Common Game Viewport Client. This means that it will route through Common UI first before anything else. And it will also allow you to navigate the menus with your controller rather than, well, anything else. It will ask you to restart, hit restart. It's done restarting. The next thing to search for in your project settings is the controller data. And I've got data for Windows and, well, yeah, windows. So here we go plus again and say CD keyboard and mouse and CD Xbox Series X. What we've done now is given the editor some icons to use depending on the controller you're using. If you're using a keyboard and mouse, it will use this keyboard controller. If you're using a gamepad controller, it will use this Xbox Series icons. And if we minimize and play, you'll see that the trigger will display an icon for F. If I switch to a controller, it will switch to RB. And it goes back and forth depending on what controller you switch to. This is one of the benefits of using Common UI. If you want a better understanding of the Common UI system, then I'm going to link a video at the top right corner of this video. So take a look right now. You should see a card. Click on that, and that tutorial should teach you all you need to know about Common UI. You may have noticed that the race manager isn't saving our best time. Despite the fact that we've been racing for a while now, it's still saying 0. Also, you may have also noticed that the settings don't work. The reason for this is that the settings and the game instance uses a save data file, and that save data only works with the race game instance, which can be found here. The race game instance isn't that big, but it does have a lot of interface functions that control the data that's being sent and saved between actors. If you have your own custom game instance, remember to implement this BPI race events interface. Copy all this and set all of these interfaces like get race data, get character type, get team index, get character type. All of these are very necessary if you want the menu to work and if you want the settings menu to work. You can also, if you don't have your own custom game instance, you can come to your project settings, type in game instance, and set it to race game instance. Close that, play. Now we go to settings. You can see that our menu, our map zoom setting is working fine now. All these other settings will also work, but you have to remember, keep in mind that when you change settings here, it will affect your playing editor settings. That's why this warning is here. So if I change my frame rate to 30 FPS and hit confirm, I'm just going to go back. You may notice that the video is stuttering now, just a little bit. But just so you can see it for sure, I'll say show FPS. And it's limited to 30 FPS. If I close the game and play again, it's still stuck at 30 FPS. Go back to settings, change it to 60. It's stuck at 60. Exit the game, you get the picture. So keep that in mind, that when you change any settings in the settings menu, it will affect your project as a whole. So that's a big deal. Now, if we do finish a race, we will see a time here Yep. So you saw our best time was 8 seconds. If I go back to the race trigger, our best time is updated. 8 seconds, and yeah. And with that, I've covered mostly everything that you need to know about the race template. There are other little things that I'll make videos about later. Things like how to add your character to the character select screen, or how to make your own minimap icons. But as far as the race template goes, the race manager, the checkpoints, and the AI cars, I'd say you're good to go. And I've offered explanations for how all of them work. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment or join my Discord or send me an email. Stay subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.